It happened 1 year ago today at Jonestown in Guyana, the mass suicide of 914 people that so shocked the world. Now, a year later, survivors and the relatives of the dead are still trying to recover from that experience. Ken Kashiwahara reports from San Francisco.
This is where People's Temple became a religious and social magnet, attracting the poor and the disadvantaged and those who were following Jim Jones to a socialist utopia. It is where the relatives of those who died turned their hysteria against the People's Temple. Today, a year later, People's Temple no longer occupies this building that once was its headquarters. It no longer exists except in the minds of those who survived. Tim Carter escaped death in Jonestown because Jim Jones ordered him to take $500,000 to the Soviet embassy. He still has nightmares.
Seeing my son dead in my wife's arms, with tears streaming down her cheeks while she was dying. And the sounds of screaming and women crying and children crying and the smell of cyanide.
Fred Lewis lost 27 members of his family, including his wife and 7 children.
I can't sleep, get no rest. Get up all through the night, roaming, riding around, walking, doing something to pass the time for waiting for the next day.
Fred Lewis is angry not only at what happened, but also at what has not. The mass grave where his family and other temple members are buried still has no headstones, still remains simply a large patch of dirt. A year later, the story of People's Temple is far from over. The special grand jury which subpoenaed former temple members has not issued any indictments and may never do so. Relatives and survivors have filed nearly $2 billion in lawsuits against the temple, but they may never receive a penny. Legally, court-appointed attorneys must show that People's Temple as a corporation, and not Jim Jones, was responsible for the deaths. And attorney Robert Fabian has tentatively concluded that the temple was not.
Assume there was induced suicide or murder. A corporation normally is not responsible for a murder committed even by one of its stockholders or officers.
As for the future, most believe there will never be another People's Temple. But for now, for most, People's Temple and Jonestown remain a nightmare that refuses to go away.
No one who hasn't lost anything, they can say, well, you'll get over it. But the ones who has lost, they'll never get over it. At no time. I will never get over it.
Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News, San Francisco.
Thank you, Ken. We have some late word on the Iranian hostage situation. Iran radio says tonight that 13 American hostages, 8 black men and 5 women, will be released to the Iranian Foreign Ministry tomorrow for expulsion from Iran. We'll have further developments in the situation on a special expanded edition of the ABC News Weekend Report. And we'll have an ABC News special report every night, as long as the situation in Iran remains critical. That's our report tonight. I'm Sam Donaldson. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Abortion and passed a funding bill to keep 4 cabinet departments in business. The compromise attached to the fundraising bill would allow federal payment for abortions for the poor if the mother's life is threatened and in cases of rape or incest. A year ago Sunday, a handful of names unknown to most people flashed into the national consciousness and became instant symbols. The Reverend Jim Jones, the People's Temple in Jonestown. As the horror unfolded, it was widely assumed that time would offer some explanation for the ritualistic murder and suicide of more than 900 persons. But as Steve Young reports from the scene, 1 year later it does not appear any lessons have been uncovered.
Jonestown. From the air, it now looks like the peaceful, serene South American jungle settlement it was supposed to be. A year ago, the first pilot on the scene remembers thinking the pavilion appeared to be surrounded by gaily colored picnic blankets. Then he comprehended the horror below. Little is left to suggest that this is where the suicide ritual took place. But above Jim Jones' empty chair, the sign still hangs with the words of Spanish philosopher George Santayana. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. A year later, few people want to remember, let alone talk about Jim Jones or what happened or why. How Jim Jones could fling the Bible to the floor and his followers would approve. This film, provided by KPIX-TV in San Francisco, shows that Jones turned the People's Temple into a cult and himself into a living God.
I'm peace, I'm justice, I'm equality. I am God.
Jonestown in the early days. Propaganda footage designed to depict it as a model socialist society. Now, a handful of workers are fighting back the jungle. It is a holding action. The Guyanese government doesn't know what to do with Jonestown. No one wants to live here. The only survivor still around is a little dog the Guyanese police call Fluffy. A year after it happened, no one has been held accountable for the deaths of 914 people searching for utopia. After a month of investigation, CBS News found doors closed and the record sealed. Though a U.S. congressman was murdered, there have been no public hearings, perhaps in part because Congressman Ryan, though a hero in death, was not popular with his colleagues in life. The Justice Department plans no criminal prosecutions. It says the principals all died in Jonestown and refuses to discuss the matter further. House investigators did fault the State Department and the embassy in Guyana for not adequately investigating warnings of suicide rehearsals 5 months before the suicides occurred. The testimony of the ambassador, John Burke, remains classified, and Burke refused to be interviewed on the record. San Francisco attorney Charles Gary fought People's Temple legal battles for a year and a half. He perhaps knew Jim Jones better than any outsider.
I believe in a socialist society, so that what I saw there, I may have been blinded.
Lawyer Mark Lane, who is attracted by conspiracy theories, got some of Jim Jones' legal business near the very end. The People's Temple in San Francisco made an audio recording as Lane, just a month and a half before the tragedy, said the FCC was among many government agencies out to destroy Jonestown.
The Federal Communications Commission, which is part of this administration, is involved in a conspiracy to kill people in Jonestown, Guyana.
Lane refused to be interviewed for this report.
Pain here in the chest,
yes,
and in the back, yes. And you injured your...
In San Francisco, at the People's Temple, Jim Jones, the spellbinder, performing a so-called miracle cure.
Now, where's your pain?
The building now belongs to a Korean church. People's Temple Solidarity collapsed after the calamity. Archie Iams, a 20-year associate of Jim Jones, now says some temple members feel lost without their leader.
Someone called me and others I've contacted, I found that they felt terribly let down and that nobody really cared. And the others, they wish they could have died over there.
On a hill in Oakland, California, 409 of the Jonestown dead now lie buried in a common grave. Just 2 family members have visited in the last year. Tim Carter is a survivor, though his wife and child died in Jonestown. It was suspected that Jones had told him to carry out assassinations, but there have been no revenge attacks in America. The Justice Department has found no evidence that such hit squads exist.
I think I assume more guilt than maybe a lot of people do, just in their lives normally. I was left thinking, why wasn't there, an uprising?
Steve Katsaris was leader of the Concerned Relatives. He filed the first suit against the People's Temple, but lost his daughter Maria in Jonestown. Maria lies buried near Katsaris' home in Potter Valley, California. The words are Greek and mean, I understand.
It just isn't right. And the pain is even greater to think that all this could happen and we could avoid it or ignore it or learn anything from it. But, it's a reality. Maria's buried here, and I have that in my head. I believe that there's still a danger in America. I don't believe that cults have been ended with Jim Jones.
A year ago, this picture horrified the country, but a year has passed and none of the troubling questions of Jonestown have been answered. Steve Young, CBS News, Jonestown, Guyana.
And that's the way it is. Friday, November 16th, 1979. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Sambo's presents a big breakfast.
Breakfast is served.
A big country breakfast, just $1.99.
It's a lot of breakfast for $1.99.
2 eggs, 4 slices of bacon or sausage links, hash browns, toast.
Juice, too.
And juice, just $1.99.
Served any time of day.
It's